But when I arrived in Montreal, when I was first hired, in the downtown Hudson Bay store, the brown one, it's still there today.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There's actually a small museum in the top floor. I don't know if you knew that.
No.
Yeah, there's a small museum up there.
Oh, okay.
But when I arrived, I had a meeting with Don McConnell, who was the district manager, and D.I. Finlayson, who was a manager for Quebec. And actually sat down and chatted with them a little bit. They were asking me about my experiences working with we used to say Micmac, but now they say Mi'kmaq.
Yeah.
And then he said, well, where would you like to go? And I'm just like, well, where can I go? I just assumed you would pick a spot for me. And he said, well, that's not the way it works. They had a big map and they pull it down. It covered almost the whole wall in the office. And they said, the ones that have like the green pins, they don't need a clerk, like a contract clerk. But the ones that have the red pins, we're short. We need somebody to go there.
Okay.
So I just surveyed the map and I saw this great big lake.
Yeah.
I love to fish.
Yeah.
So it seemed like it wasn't as far north as Tuktoyaktuk or one of those places. So I said, that's where I want to go. And it's funny because the comment that he said to me was, are you sure? Because the manager there is Glenn Spears. He's the most senior manager we have. He's a fur buying manager. And you have to live with him in the same house. And he's a tough manager. He's a demanding manager, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And I said to them, well, Mike, I work for my dad, so he's a tough manager too, so pretty sure I can handle it. You know? So, and basically that's how it was Mistissini. Because there were other places I could have went, but it seemed like the fishing would be good in a big lake like that, you know?
I guess you noticed a big change when the James Bay project.
Massive change.
Yeah.
A massive change. Well, there's a story here that the Hudson Bay at one point decided that they were going to make their own money. And the money would be called beaver tokens. I don't know if you know that story or not, but and they soon realized after they started to initiate using the beaver tokens, so you would bring in furs and you would be given tokens, that it was senseless. It didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Because they weren't going anywhere to shop. They couldn't spend the beaver tokens at Zellers.
Yeah.
They can only spend it at the bay. And so the story was that they just eventually took them and dumped them in the lake.
Yeah.
And so I remember one of the principals who came here years later, and he's the one who brought the story because he was a Hudson Bay manager in Fort Severn. So that story made it all the way to Fort Severn. And
You remember where it was?
Well, Glenn Spears told me it was where the dock was. Not the dock today.
Oh, okay.
It was on the other side facing the McLeod Point because that's where he used to dock his boat. And so I know people used to poke around there in the springtime in the mud when the water was low.
Yeah.
But I remember the principal, Fred Close. I'm not sure if you recall Fred Close, but Fred, he was a scuba diver. So he came from Fort Severn as a principal, not as a Hudson Bay employee, but he went scuba diving looking for them, but you know, he never found them and stuff. So if you think about that, the credit system was the easiest way to function. So Hudson Bay had a tiny little building up in Nichigon.
They were coins.
Yeah, they were actual coins, minted coins. And you would go into the Hudson Bay building in Nichigon, which was uninhabited. Nobody lived there at the old DOT site. And you would take flour or take dry goods, like to be baking powder and flour and sugar, and that stuff was there. So the trappers there would go in there and they would just, if they needed something, they would take it and just leave a note. There was a clipboard there and they would just write what they took. And when, like, I would go to Nichigon on the plane and I would reload all the supplies in there and I would pick up all the papers and bring them back to Mistissini and they would charge them. So, but once income security came along, it really became, you bring your check to the store and you could deposit your check at the store. But you could also withdraw cash. You can go to the office because the store started to become actually the de facto bank in a way. So, but then you could go to town because once you had cash, you weren't really tied to the store as much. So I think that relationship changed dramatically and continued to change over over the years until Northern eventually left here. Yeah. Yeah.
What year did they close?
I don't know.
Uh,
I don't know. I
but
think they had it.
There are still Northern stores in existence.
Absolutely. And I think there's a few of the Cree communities that have Northern stores still. I think East Maine probably has one. I believe Chashaby has a Northern store. Northern stores is all over the north, right? Alaska to Greenland. Like they're everywhere. The Northern stores is the Hudson Bay Company had its retail stores like downtown Montreal and Toronto,
Yeah.
and they had its Northern stores division, which was the real, what I call the real Hudson Bay, okay? And the employees, the management employees of Northern Stores Division bought the Northern Stores from the Hudson Bay Company. And they had a license to use the name for 2 years after the purchase. And then they switched over to Northern Stores instead of no more Bay, no more Hudson Bay, right?
Yeah.
So it was actually the employees who bought the whole division and and it's still a good operation for in a lot of places.
Yeah. They lost Zellers.
Yeah. Well, I would say like the retail climate changed a lot over the years, but to be honest, I think one of the things that you say, did the James Bay Agreement change it a lot?
Yeah.
Well, it changed it in a massive amount of ways.
Yeah.
The economic development that's occurred over those years, the change in lifestyle that's it's taken half a century to happen.
Yeah.
But we see that traditional lifestyle is less and less practiced as with each passing decade, I would say, to the point now where it's not as dominant as it once was, not even close. It's really, it's the less dominant part of the way people live. Here we have pretty much, a modern society and a modern community with, over 80, I believe now there's over 80 Canadian government agreements with various levels of government.
Did he sell snowmobiles like before James Bay project?
Yeah, but they would have been financed on a year-by-year contract. But believe me, to be able to afford to buy a new Skidoo before that agreement, it was not a common occurrence. It was quite uncommon, But the year of 1976 was, the signing of the agreement was in 75. But no money was received until 76.
Yeah.
So in 76, people received retroactive payments for an entire year.
Yeah.
Okay. So I remember we sold 110 Elan Skidoos that year.
Oh, wow.
And there were 2 in a crate coming off the truck. Well, I had to assemble the skis and the windshields and stuff. But I mean, it had to be a record, I think, because everybody just had more money than they'd ever seen in their lives.
Yeah.
So
they sold outboard motors too?
Yeah, and they started to sell outboard motors and chainsaws and all those sorts of
they
things.
had canoes. They sold canoes.
Always.
Before,
Yeah, always.
Yeah.
Those would be canvas canoes on wood frames, right? So
When you started working with the Hudson's Bay Company, did you have to sign a contract like for you had to work for a number of years? Did they hold you to something like that? Or?
Well, yes is the answer. I think it was 2 years. Or until I repaid what I owed them, whatever came first. Because when I came in Montreal, I had to go first at the dentist, and they did some dental work. And then there was, the transportation, like the trip up on the airplane, old Nord Air at the old Chicago Airport on the gravel runway. But it would take you 2 years to pay it back because my starting salary, excuse me, I think it was $6,800.
Wow.
Minus $1,200 for room and board. So you're going to take a while to pay it back, right? Yeah. So it was and they gave us a handbook. An employee handbook. It was quite small. Probably about 20 or 30 pages in there.
That was the first rule.
You can't get married.
No.
Really. So like, I mean, today's world of human rights or whatever, that would be a travesty. That would never pass today. But you could understand the practicality of that. Because if you got married, and you had like children and furniture, and they had to move you to these remote posts across the north, it would be very expensive, right? So they wanted single guys that they could move around. You know what I mean? That's what they said. And of course, I was here 3 months, and I already had a girlfriend from here. And they tried to transfer me the first year I was here, because I think that probably the manager told him he's getting serious with this girl, so we should transfer him. But you know, I said no. I'm going to stay here. I want to stay here. So
how many years in total did you work here?
Here, this is going into my 50th year this August. So
no, I mean for the Hudson Bay.
I think 7 years in total. 7 years in total, and then across the street at Meacham for decades after that. And eventually we put the Northern Stores out. But you know, it's always it's a sad thing to see such a part of history to leave. But I just think that you know, the Cree people and the people of Mistissini were ready to build their own businesses. They were very much engaging in economic development, and you could see that progression over the years.
Involved in a lot of that
Of
stuff.
course, yeah. So hotels and banks and grocery stores and all of these, you know, the True Value store that used to be here, that is now Cree Home Hardware.
Home Hardware,
So I think there was a sense of, you know, like taking control. There was a sense of economic development. There was a push for employment so that people could have steady income that was, you know, would increase their quality of living. You could see all of those things coming, you know. Of course, they evolve over time, but
I always remember when the store was down by the shore. Spears had this big radio. Was that the telephone?
Yeah. Well, that's the two-way radio system that they use.
Call. You know, down south.
No, not from the store. No, that it's maybe before I came, but when I came here, he had a big radio there, but that was for bush camps. You know, for calling out to bush camps. Where the radio was in the log building that was the band office, if you remember. Yeah. And you would have to wait in line if you wanted to try and make a call, and that radio phone would connect to the operator in Chibougamau. You know, back in the old days where they were plugging the wires and, you know, stuff like that. And you would give her the number to phone, like I would give her the Nova Scotia number. But honestly, I think I was here a whole year. Well, almost a whole year, 10 months before I had any communication with anybody, like my family or anybody down south.
Wow.
Yeah. I think I received a letter from my mother at Christmas, and I didn't write her back, sadly. Sorry, Mom. But yeah, but I eventually called her probably after Goose Break, you know, after breakup. And I told her that I was coming home with my new wife. And she's like, "What? You got married?" So my family really weren't eating.
What year was it?
Ooh. 77. 76. The same. I wasn't even here a whole year when I got married. So when that happens, like, of course, the district manager came in for his visit, and he said, "You're going up north." I believe it was Nanisivik he offered to send me as a manager.
Oh my God.
Nanisivik was I think a small mining town there in Inuit. It's still Quebec. It's still in Quebec, but it's way up the top of as a manager. So I said to him, "Well, no, I'll respectfully decline that." So when you do that, you cease to become a contract clerk. And then you become a local clerk. Which has, you know, not a lot of possibilities to it, I would say. So it's a change.
A different book.
No book. Throw the book out. But you know, I've been married since then. I'm still married to the same girl. So I think I made the right choice.
And over the years, I guess you remember like the old people that have
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say this, because I worked, with the public so much over the 50 years,
Yeah.
then I would say it's just some of the greatest people to work for,
Yeah.
to serve. Like,
Yeah.
the patience, the understanding,
Yeah.
vastly different than what I had experienced down south working in my father's store, where it was very demanding, and um, for me when I came here, it's just such a huge difference in the way the people were. The
Yeah.
people here are patient, because I think their lives are about patience, really. When you're living in the bush and you're trapping or you're hunting or you're fishing, all of those things require patience.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So, but I also think it's like time isn't the same. Time
Yeah.
isn't the same.
Yeah.
Here as it is for the rat race of the South, People here have a different approach to it. So,
I remember when I was going to school in the South,
yeah, there's a hustle.
Why is everybody
You rush
running
it.
around?
Yeah, the pace of life was different here. And I always remember, I'll tell you a funny story. One of the Cree guys I was working with, and of course we were putting grocery orders together to load on the plane. And, well, I was trying to rush, because the pilot wanted to leave at daybreak, in the winter, that's like 7 in the morning or whatever. And he was warming up the plane and it was rushing. And I told him, we have to hurry. And he goes, why? Why do we have to hurry? And I'm like, well, because the plane's waiting for us. But the plane can't leave without the groceries. He's going to wait. He has to wait. He has no choice. He can't take off with an empty plane. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. So it kind of illustrates, and he always used to say to me, you can run around like crazy and try and go fast as you can. He said, but the sun always comes up tomorrow anyways.
Oh, yeah.
It always comes up tomorrow.
Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah.
and I have a great appreciation for the, that sense of patience,
Yeah.
that sense of, there is no point in, rushing,
Oh yeah.
It's not the model like in Japan where it's about productivity and efficiency,
Yeah.
But people here are productive and efficient in their own way,
Yeah.
in their own way, and it's not a run around like a crazy person way.
Well, it reminds me of something that, like when I used to work with these archaeologists,
Yeah.
or anthropologists,
Yeah.
they would always say, like, wouldn't it be faster if you did it this way?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but they've always done it like that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's,
Yeah.
be together. That's the whole thing.
I think it's kind of ingrained in the culture and way of life,
Yeah.
in the culture and the way of life. But, in 50 years of working here, I cannot remember a single time when somebody got really mad at me. You know what I mean? Like, maybe a little sharp, but not mad, like
Yeah.
always in that calm way, in that patient
Yeah.
way, you know what I mean? And it's, and I guess I must have liked it because, hey,
Yeah.
I'm still here, so, yeah. And I'll probably be here till the end, so,
Do you remember the pilots that he used?
I
guess they stayed in his house too.
remember one guy, one guy from Maniwaki, his name was Rolly. He was crazy, that guy. Well, Spears was fussy about the house. He didn't like anybody to make a mess, like if you're a pilot and you got gas or whatever on your clothes, like they commonly did, you'd have to take them out in the porch, on your boots. You wouldn't be inside the house. But he had flown up, Rolly flew Glenn up north on a fur run. And when he came back, the pilot stayed at the house with us,
Oh, yeah.
So Rolly came in. Spears went right to the store. Of course, he would do all this slips up, post to accounts and get the business end done. But Rolly would be done. He'd fix up his plane and he would come up to the house and, he'd have a drink. But this particular time he had two fish
Oh,
that he got at a camp.
yeah.
That they gave him. And he had a garbage bag and he brought it in, and I don't know if there's a hole in the but the fish like dumped out on the floor, and he was trying to grab them, and there was fish flying everywhere. And he was he's like, Glenn's coming, help me. I remember Rolly. I remember Mr. Doucette, was a younger pilot, and his family. I don't even remember in Montreal Canadiens that Doucette always sang the national anthem.
Yeah.
Well, that was his son. He flew for Fecto.
Roger Doucette.
Yeah, Roger Doucette.
Yeah.
That was his son who flew here. And I remember him. Of course, I remember Paul Pedalomino for sure. He would have been co-pilot back in those days, trying to get his hours.
Remember Figaro?
Yeah, I do. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I do.
People really liked that guy.
Well, I think it was the way it was, wasn't it? Like it's a small community, tight. Everybody knew everybody, and it was kind of a.
I always think of these people, like Spears and Mr. McLeod.
Yeah.
We should name streets after these people. Eh? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
And
it's
Figaro too.
Yeah. We have enough streets now.
Yeah.
We're probably running out of street names.
We'll cross the bridge. There'll be more streets.
Well, I think they are historical figures. Their contribution to, the community, to the people.
Yeah.
They should be recognized. I think they should be recognized. And even though time doesn't wait for anybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's good to know where you come from, to know where you're going. I think those are kind of important things.
Yeah. Well, shall we?
It's a pleasure talking to you today, John.
Yes. Well, I learned a lot of stuff too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a pleasure to come in and maybe put some of this stuff on.
One last point, when you were talking about marriage,
Sure.
back in the, in the 1800s, 1700s, when the Hudson Bay Company employees were here, they had country wives, they called them.
Yes.
And they had wives back home.
Well, I did. Of course, I was only a teenager when I came here, but my wife of 50 years didn't want no part of being the country wife. She was like only wife kind of person. So
Okay, thank you very much.
it was my pleasure.